What's up, everyone? Before we get into this episode, we're going to fill you in with a little bit of current information. Given that this is an ECAC Hockey Conference Spotlight, we're going to give you the best players and the best teams at certain stats and throughout the standings. So let's get right into that. Because this was recorded on Thursday, some of the information may be out of date in the conversation, but this information is up to date as of Monday. Let's go. Quinnipiac in sole possession of first place with 38 points, but close behind them is Dartmouth and Cornell with 36 each. Princeton at 31 and Harvard at 30 chasing them. Colgate at 25, Union and Clarkson tied at 21. Yale in 9th with 18, St. Lawrence at 14, RPI at 13, and Brown at 11. Overall points leaders in ECAC hockey, Ethan Wittenbach from Quinnipiac leads the way, the freshman, with 47 points in 30 games on Hobie Baker watch right now. Clarkson's Ryan Bottrill in second with 34 and 30, and Dartmouth's Hayden Stavroff in third with 33 and 24. In goals, it's Stavroff with 22, Wittenbach with 19, and Quinnipiac's Marcus Vidicek tied with 17 with Union's Brandon Bure. In rating, Quinnipiac's Elliot Gronewald leads the way with plus 37, followed by Dartmouth's Eric Charpentier with 26 and Colin Grable with plus 25. In goals allowed average, another Bobcat, Dylan Silverstein leads the way with a 1.58, followed by Dartmouth's Emmett Croteau with a 1.71 and Cornell's Alexis Cornoyer with 1.91. And in save percentage, Croteau leads with .929, Dylan Silverstein just a point behind him with .928, and Cornoyer at .922. Alongside me for this week's ECAC Hockey Conference Spotlight is CHN and Cornell Sun reporter Jane McNally. Jane, thanks so much for coming out on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to jump right back in it because we've both been watching ECAC hockey for a long time. And it's had this meteoric rise back to relevance this year with multiple teams in the USCHO rankings. What do you think has been the key for this rise back to relevance?
Yeah, I think it's been a really great year in terms of the ECAC performing against out-of-conference opponents. It's not something that we've seen them outperform Hockey East in that category in a long time. I think it's obviously you have the perennial contenders at the top of the league, but I also think that it's just become a lot more competitive overall. A lot of coaching changes in the last 5-10 years, and we've also kind of seen the Ivy League kind of step up and not feeling the effects of the pandemic quite as much. So I think those are some of the main contributors, but it's definitely been a super exciting race so far.
Yeah, definitely. Coaching changes have been huge. We've seen them at Cornell and Yale especially making a huge impact. What do you think it is about those coaching changes that's making these programs so successful?
Yeah, I can obviously speak on Cornell pretty well. Obviously, Mike Schaefer was a legendary coach, had so much success at Cornell, but I think there's also just kind of, having a fresh face and kind of a new energy and presence can kind of like rejuvenate a program. And especially with Cornell, they brought in so many young players, class of 12 freshmen, 2 sophomore transfers. They're kind of learning alongside Casey Jones, although not that he's a rookie head coach by any means, so he's got a lot of experience. But and I think we can see the competitiveness out of Yale. I think there's something to be said about the new energy that's in the locker room. I think there maybe some guys get more chances that they weren't getting before. But yeah, a lot can be said about the coaching changes.
Yeah, definitely. And with new coaching changes comes a lot of times utilizing these new rules and looking at some of these rookies, like, your Antonin Veros, your Xavier Veluz, across the conference coming in from the CHL. How do you think they've helped this rise to relevance specifically?
Oh, it's without a doubt, it's made the league a lot stronger. I think there was a lot of questions about how the ECAC and how they would do with with the CHL rule change, because obviously you've got the big names going to the Big Ten schools, all these top programs, but I think overall it just opens up the player pool so much more to these coaches. I mean, I've talked to Casey Jones about this, about how those top players are always going to pick maybe the bigger name schools, but it's just opening up so much more talent that are able to filter into these leagues, and that's what I think we're seeing. I mean, Cornell, they've got a CHL recruit in Alexi Cornelier in net. You look at Quinnipiac, all the stuff that they've been doing as well. I'm pretty sure most teams in the ECAC have got one or two or more. So I think maybe you're not getting those blue chip recruits, but I think the talent is so much deeper, and it's just making the league so much more competitive, and it's great for the league.
Yeah, definitely. And another competitive team who we haven't talked about, and I think needs to be talked about this year, is Dartmouth. Under Reed Cashman, they've had this not meteoric, but actually rather slow and methodical rise to the top of the conference, building up their program's status within the Ivy League and within the conference as a whole. And, Reed Cashman, obviously a Rand Pecknold disciple. He used to play for him and used to coach with him. But how can you speak to their rise as compared to some of the other programs?
Yeah, I think Dartmouth's a team that's been knocking on the door the last couple of years. As you said, it wasn't necessarily meteoric, but they've been in Lake Placid the last 2 years, and they've experienced the heartbreak and losing in I think, a semifinal both years. But I think there's nothing super, like you said, there's not one crazy star player. Obviously, Hayden Stavrov's having a great year, but I think Reed Cashman has done a really great job with that program in terms of just the system that they play. He's a great guy to talk to. But yeah, I think the last couple of years, those experiences in Lake Placid and getting a taste of it and not quite getting to the top, it's kind of really helped that program up from where it was even just a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the attendance figures alone, going from a couple of years ago to now this year, people want to go out and watch hockey in Hanover. People will go travel to watch Dartmouth. They're starting to really make their name as a proper Ivy program. It's not like it's a fallen giant like Harvard was for a couple of years and like Yale was for even more than that, maybe 6 or 7 years almost. It's an incoming giant almost if they can keep this up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, you hit the nail on the head there. I think when the on-ice product's improving, like, that draws fans in, and I think it's just a cycle because, I've talked to players just about how everyone loves to play at Liner Rink at Cornell just because of the atmosphere, and that kind of thing builds just with the product that's on the ice. If people keep coming, then the energy is going to be there. Dartmouth will keep improving. I think they've been playing very well on home ice. So I think there's something to be said about that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And something else to be said about the program is definitely their depth throughout the squad. You have your CJ Foleys, you have your Hayden Stavrovs, and your Emmett Croteaus, but the way that they roll 4 lines and 2 goaltenders is, almost unmatched by some of these other top 10 teams. And just, I think it speaks to almost what the conference has done, because it's always, ECAC hockey has always run on depth. It's never been the superstar powered like the Hockey East. It's never been, the big name schools like the Big Ten, and it's never been the super hockey markets like the NCHC. It's always run on finding those little gems for your third line and for your fourth line, and that's something that Dartmouth has done really well in their rise.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a huge part of ECAC hockey, and just the ability to, when one line's not going, you can rely on your next line and the one after that. And it's never going to, obviously you are going to have those star players, but it's never going to be, you're never going to be reliant on one line. And then if that one doesn't work, then you're not able to score. I think that's a huge part of Dartmouth's success, a huge part of the ECAC's success. And I think it's also why you're able to see so much success from these teams in the postseason tournaments when you're looking at teams like Cornell and Quinnipiac when they're going on their runs in the NCAA tournament. People are always shocked because you don't have those brand names in college hockey, but I think that depth is crucial, and it is definitely something that can aid a team in a deep run like that, being able to roll 4 lines consistently.
Yeah, depth and veteran players for sure, which are also really important in those lower lines and in the top lines as well. You talk about a tournament run. Everybody, I think, outside of maybe a select few in ECAC hockey, was shocked when Cornell upset Michigan State in the Toledo Regional last year. How can you speak to the depth on that team specifically and how it's sort of proving as a precursor to what we're seeing this year?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was quite shocking to a lot of people, but to those that don't watch ECAC hockey, as you said, it's not quite as shocking because obviously I think the experience is a big factor. That Cornell team in particular had 10 seniors, I believe, who had the last 2 years lost in the NCAA tournament in the regional final. So kind of had some unfinished business there. But yeah, I think the experience is a huge thing. And that depth as well, as you were saying.
You talk about postseason heartbreak, but now we could be starting to see some postseason success as the teams with this heartbreak start to build upon it, like you said, with Dartmouth. How do you think the conference as a whole can sustain this success in the long term?
Yeah, I think, one, when you look at the CHL rule change, I think the talent is going to keep coming into the league, and the pool of players is going to keep getting better. I think just making sure that these teams aren't straying from the philosophies that have made them so successful. I know I can speak on Cornell in that even through all of the craziness that's happened in college sports and college hockey the last year or so, their recruiting philosophies have remained unchanged. The type of players they're looking for, maybe the places in which they're looking for have changed a bit, or have varied, but that kind of player that they're in search of is not going to change. So I think the type of roster building techniques that these teams have used, that will make sure that the ECAC continues on this trajectory. But yeah, I think just not changing up what they're doing. Continuing to schedule those out of conference matchups have been really, really crucial. I just think that this whole change, all that's happened, has kind of brought more teams onto an even playing field, a lot more even than people might think.
Yeah, and there's also a sense of stability within a lot of these Ivy League teams because of the fact that there hasn't been much change. You know, you still get your 4 years. There's no red shirt. There's no COVID year. There's no grad year. There's no NIL. You know, if you want to transfer out, that's it. And I think there's a certain comfort to the players understanding the stability of a team like that. Do you think so?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're committing to an Ivy League school, you're committing to getting the degree. I think that's the huge thing. And it's also a certain type of student athlete as well that's willing to put in a ton of work in the classroom and put in a lot of work that's not on the ice. And that kind of work ethic can translate onto the ice as well. But yeah, I think 100% these kids that are committing to these schools know what they're signing up for. And then, like you said, it's really uncommon for there to be a ton of movement in terms of transfer portal and NIL and stuff like that. It's a lot more. I would call it kind of like the quintessential college hockey experience. You are a true student athlete at one of those schools, and I think the kids that are there love being that and love embodying that.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome way to describe it. There hasn't been much change. At a school like Harvard, they're still recruiting. You go back to a long time ago. They're still recruiting well, from Chris Drury all the way up to Matt Coronado. They still want to recruit hardworking but humble players. And when you build a team and not just a collection of players, it starts becoming something that becomes greater than just a group of stars on the ice who might just happen to be good at hockey.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a classic, like, sports cliche. Like, sometimes you can put a team of all-stars out on the ice, but they're not going to beat a team that's, like, cohesive and plays a good system and have their style of play all complement each other. I think, again, that's what's contributed to this postseason success for the ECAC in the last few years is these teams play such a hard system and such a cohesive system that it's able, and not that these other teams don't, 100%, they all have their own great styles of play and are super hard to play against, but I think people underestimate how hard these teams are to play because of they're not reliant when things aren't going right. They're not reliant on the individual skill. They're always going to default to their team and their system.
Yeah, you don't see a ton of, first round, even second round picks across this conference because I think it doesn't matter about if you have an NHL skill set or not. It matters if you can play right here, right now, and that's what makes it night in, night out one of the closest competitions in America. We saw just in January, RPI took Quinnipiac to overtime on their 50th anniversary game. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't speak to the depth of the conference, I don't know what does.
Yeah, I think, like, when I talk to other people that don't really know ECAC, like, I always talk about how difficult these games are and how close all of the games are, really. Even if sometimes the scores don't show it, because then sometimes these teams will play out of conference and it's a completely different result. But I think there's something to be said about how tight these games have been and how obviously there are teams with more draft picks than others, but the NHL skill set or what people perceive to be the NHL skill set is not necessarily what's going to make you successful in college hockey, especially in those big rivalry games, or not necessarily rivalry games, but those big games like RPI, as you said, like really gunning to win that game because of what was going on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a rivalry. I've been going to Quinnipiac games for 4 years now, and we go into those games and it just feels like a rivalry because you never want to lose in conference. And especially this year, when it's so close, you can't afford a loss in the Cleary Cup race.
Definitely. I think there's so much parity. I think that's the crucial word is like you look at the top four, which is that crucial bye in the opening round, like 4 teams separated by 3 points, which is 1 game essentially. Obviously, Cornell and Quinnipiac have a game in hand there, but dropping any kind of conference matchup can be the difference between home ice and a one and done, but yeah, it's definitely been it's been a crazy year, and you can feel that these teams are desperate to win every single night.
Yeah, and I think part of the effect of that is players who might not have had the NHL skill set ending up becoming NHL players. We saw just this year, national champion with Quinnipiac, of course my example because I go to Quinnipiac, Zach Metsa, who came in as, a bottom 6-ish kind of forward in Rand Pecknold's team, ended up staying for 5 years and became one of the best offensive defensemen in America and worked his way up to the hottest team in the NHL. And it speaks to the level of competition and how that helps develop players. Even when ECAC hockey isn't as relevant, even when it is a little bit more top-heavy, teams still want to go in and play spoiler against those top teams.
100%. I mean, there's so many names that have come out of the ECAC, and and make it to the NHL, and people are like, who are these guys? Like, where'd they get them from? I mean, when I think ECAC and the Quinnipiac example, I also think of Colin Graff, who's been great for the Sharks this year, especially on just both sides of the puck. I think Cornell, Sam Alinsky, the defenseman for the Avalanche, who just signed a big extension, making almost $5 million a year. It really does speak to the quality of play in the ECAC, and also just the determination. Like, when you're coming to one of these schools, you're not necessarily going to get the same kind of publicity or whatnot from maybe some of the other ones, or might not be quite as taken seriously, but they've produced so many quality NHL players, even if they're not coming into college as a 18, 19-year-old with that perceived NHL skill set, like from the draft.
Yeah, definitely. Graff also going to 2 ECAC hockey schools. He went to Union before going to Quinnipiac, for those of you who may have not known that about his career. But enough about the players in the past. Let's talk about the players that are here right now. Who are your favorites at each position in the conference, and who are your favorite rookies as well?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I think when you look at, we mentioned him before, Hayden Stavroff for Dartmouth. He's been unreal, just a pure goal scorer. And then also with Quinnipiac, Ethan Wittenbach has been great. He gave Cornell a ton of problems up in Ithaca. I think D, as we mentioned, Xavier Veilleux for Cornell has been great. Kind of just kid from Quebec and came out of the USHL, won a championship there, and it's an Islanders pick, but he's been unreal, just racking up the minutes. I think he was just named Defender of the Month. Let's see. I think goaltending has also been a big strength of the ECAC this year. You look at Emmett Croteau, like for Dartmouth, he's been electric. Alexis Cormier for Cornell, just a freshman, but big 6'4" frame in that. He's been great for them, been very stable down the stretch. There's so many guys I could name, and I know I'm just naming a couple of teams right now, but I think for Cornell, someone to kind of keep your eye on is Jonathan Castagna. I think Ryan Walsh gets a lot of attention. He was on that USCS, the Collegiate Selects team at the Spengler Cup, but Castagna, he's technically the second-line center, but, they're both top-line centers in the program's eyes, and Castagna's a prospect for the Utah Mammoth. Just such a fun player to watch at center. Super creative, super skilled skater that I think people should definitely keep their eye on.
Yeah, Castagna is just one of those ECAC hockey type players that, he's not going to be the face of the team, but when he's out there on the ice, he's going to show up and he's going to make plays and he's going to win you games. 100%. And you also mentioned goaltending. Goaltending has been, one of the great strengths of ECAC hockey for a long time now. The likes of Ian Shane and Yaniv Peretz even recently coming through and earning pro contracts, like Emmett Croteau, Matej Marinov, Alexis Cormier coming in, maybe not being some of those highly touted goaltending prospects like a Jacob Fowler or a Jack Ivankovic have been in recent years, but really showing up and taking the number one spot with force.
Definitely. It's hard to say where that goaltending prowess comes from. I think it's just so hard as a goaltender to get recruited and make it to the NCAA that there's just so much talent to go around. But yeah, it's been super, super fun to watch. Emmett Croteau has been great. Cormier, as we said. I feel like every week when I'm writing up a quick scouting report on the opponent, the goaltender is always the most interesting player to watch. So yeah, it's been super. It makes for a very competitive game because every goal you're gonna have to work for it. And yeah, it's been awesome to watch.
You know you're going to have to work for every goal, especially through defense in this conference. It's not been known for its high goal scorers, but the defenders it has produced through the years that have stayed around through college hockey have become, iconic names for fans of their teams. What do you think of some of the top defenders in ECAC hockey this year?
The big thing with the defense is just how important of a role they play on both sides of the puck. Obviously keeping goals out, but you see a lot of these teams are really great at starting the rush from the back and having their defenders on the rush and pinching up and able to factor in on the scoring. That's been a really crucial part, and these defenders are really just the cogs to the machine of the offenses. So it's really exciting to watch when you're watching a defenseman go up the rush and able to create those scoring opportunities.
Yeah, even a shutdown guy like Charlie Letty was before he went down for a bit this year. He was, playing that sort of Jacob Slavin, Adam Pellick role that you don't really see a lot in college, but if you're going to see it in any conference, it's going to be in ECAC hockey.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many of those guys where they're just impossible to get by. And I think it's something we see in these out-of-conference matchups. Some of these skilled forwards are just getting shut down by these big defenders. I mean, I know at Cornell, they're one of the tallest and heaviest teams in the country. You even look at some of the guys that are playing ECAC hockey are on the third and fourth lines that are they measuring at 6'3" or 6'4" that are just they're a nightmare to play against. But yeah, I mean, I think on Cornell there's been Luke Ashton, who is a transfer from Minnesota State. He measures in at 6'6", I believe, and he's been really great shutdown defender. There's a really long reach, and that's been giving teams a lot of problems. But 100%, those lockdown defensive D-men have been really key, and I think especially these out of conference matchups.
Yeah, you can't teach size, but another thing you can't teach is clutch. Now, we mentioned a lot on the podcast these teams coming up a little bit short in recent years in heartbreaking games, but also being able to pull off a few heartbreaks before it mattered most. Who are your tournament picks in ECAC hockey this year and why?
Well, I mean, I think right now they've got 3 that are standing in the MPI in Cornell, Dartmouth, Quinnipiac. We'll see how Dartmouth fares down the stretch, but I think all 3 of those teams are 100% capable of getting into the tournament. Cornell and Quinnipiac, barring some things, should get at-large bids, and then it's really anyone's race to the Whitelaw Cup, as we've seen in the last few years, just all the upsets that have happened and teams making a run. I mean, last year when Cornell went and won it, they were the 6th seed in the ECAC. I think the year before when Cornell won it, they were playing St. Lawrence, who is a 7th seed, something like that. So it's really anyone's conference, and I wouldn't be surprised if this does become a 3-bid league this year.
And I think that's what we love about it the most, and that's what the fans love about it the most. Jane, thanks so much for coming on. Where can everybody find you?
I mean, you can follow me on Twitter or X. It's Jane McNally _. And I cover Cornell men's hockey for the Cornell Daily Sun. So you can go to cornellsun.com, click on our men's hockey tab. You'll find all my coverage there, as well as on college hockey news. I contribute lots of ECAC stories, so you could definitely check that out as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, you're going to the Bean Pot.
This is true. I'll be back there on Monday after a big Cornell Colgate series, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.